Hi, I'm Christopher Golden. I'm the author and creator of Key to Freedom. This commentary will give you further insight into the creation of this custom story, but if you have not played it beforehand, this commentary that you will be hearing may spoil the story quite a bit. So unless you've played through this custom story, I would strongly suggest that you disable the commentaries in the options menu so that you can experience the game the way it's meant to be experienced. For simplicity's sake, I will be referring to the entire game as Amnesia. I will refer to Amnesia's main campaign as Dark Descent, and I will be referring to this custom story as Key to Freedom. Alright, let's begin. I've worked very hard to get this courtyard to look as good as possible, and the reason why it's such a difficult thing to do is because Amnesia doesn't have very impressive looking outdoor graphics. Textures are very blurry and the houses and trees lack detail. In fact, even the outdoor scene from Dark Descent is rather mediocre at best. This is why I wanted the player to start in a courtyard. The walls surrounding the courtyard prevents the player from wandering into the village or into the forest, so that they don't have to subject themselves to the horrors that is ugly graphics. This room was actually the very first thing I did using the HPL level editor. In fact, when I started working on this, I never intended on making a fully realized custom story. I was only interested in making one room or maybe one level. And because I was experimenting so much, as a result, this room pretty much has almost every visual element that Amnesia is capable of. And I must say, these tools given to us are actually quite good. They're not perfect, but good to the point where I decided to make a full custom story. Later I would find out that this was the same editor that was used in the creation of Dark Descent itself. This was also the first puzzle I've ever worked on, and this was before I understood scripting, so this is purely physics driven, and that's usually very risky because anything could go wrong and can potentially be game breaking. Due to the possible risks, this is the last time I would use such a method in Key to Freedom. Anticipation can add to the suspense in the survival horror. In fact, it's more effective than just a simple jump scare. Although I did not want to introduce the monster too early into the game, I did want the player to be aware that there is at least one lurking somewhere in this mansion. As a result, I would try different ways of hinting of the monster's existence, such as having it walk through corridors with very little light that only reveals the silhouette of the creature, or just by having its shadow hint of its hideous figure. Now, some of you might wonder, why would you do this? I mean, obviously I already know what this monster looks like. I've played through Dark Descent. Well, that's the thing. I designed this custom story for not just those that have already played through the game's main campaign, but also for those that have not. There are three methods of lighting the game: point lights, spotlights, and box lights. Skilled map editors always try to remind us that box lights are important, but I can see why some people don't like using them. It presents a few challenges that are not an issue with point lights and spotlights. You see, box lights are exactly that. They are boxes that contain light. Anything outside of the box is completely dark. So this large entrance hall is at a consistent brightness because of the box light that surrounds it. But if you go downstairs that leads to one of the basements, those areas are much darker. In short, the problem I was facing was that there needed to be a seamless transition from dark to light. And this spot right here is where the box light ends. But the box itself has no gradient capabilities. So this spot in particular has a lot of point lights and spotlights in order to disguise the transition from light to dark as the player moves in and out of the box light. I once played a PlayStation 1 game called Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and at the beginning of level 1 you walk through a long dark corridor. There is no music playing. In fact, the only thing you hear is the wind and thunder in the background, and the only thing to light your way are a few small candles. In that short portion of the level, Symphony of the Night created a very creepy atmosphere for a few seconds before the action began. Of course, there is no better game out there to recreate this effect than Amnesia. Wanting to have lightning was the first time I realized I needed to understand scripting. I then decided to take a look at Dark Descent's original script file for the first level to see how the guys at Frictional Games did the lightning in the game. But because it was too complex for me to comprehend, I decided to find my own way of doing it. I wasn't sure of how successful I would be since I was so inexperienced when it came to scripting in a custom story. However, I did lots of research in understanding the many functions that were available in Amnesia, and thanks to a reliable Amnesia community as well as a website that lists the many things that this game is capable of, I was able to craft a technique that would allow for the lightning to function the way I wanted it to. For me, this was a great accomplishment, considering it how new I was at this.
October 1878. The household appears to be under tremendous strain. The sudden illness of Lord Gregory Harrington IV appears to be taking its toll on everyone, especially Madame Lydia. She seems drained and exhausted. The severity of Lord Gregory's pneumonia concerns her night and day. I think she has observed the same thing I have. Lord Gregory is afraid of losing more than just his life. Neither him nor young Madame Lydia have any posterity to inherit Ashbury Manor, with all its estates and wealth. Nevertheless, we are all exerting ourselves to make sure matters run smoothly. The servants are frantically trying to keep things in order, while Lord Gregory's advisors are taking care of county matters. Oh, how I miss the days when their father headed this household. Nothing was at stake, and everything seemed perfect. I certainly took that time of my life for granted.
Douglas Cooper, a friend of mine, played through this whole custom story, and I remember him getting stuck in this area. It just never occurred to him that he should look up, only to find that there is a trapdoor in the ceiling. Several people on the Frictional Games forum also played through the incomplete beta version of Key to Freedom, and some had also complained that they did not know where to go. So I added more light and some dust falling from the ceiling to draw the player's attention toward it.
October 1878. It is with a heavy heart that I pen these words. Lord Gregory Harrington IV has passed away. The physicians said that his added stress about Ashbury Manor accelerated his death. Why do men cling so tenaciously to their earthly cares and possessions? Madame Lydia's grief is deep, though I cannot imagine what her state would be without her dear friend Peter. He has been a great source of comfort. Life will be challenging for Madame Lydia now as the inheritance has fallen to her. She will be instated as the Duchess of the county and owner of Ashbury Manor. This evening, after most of the matters of the Duke's death were attended to, Madame Lydia held a meeting with several of the best engineers and architects in the county. I found this rather peculiar. Heaven only knows what she has planned.
This is Madame Lydia's room. Even after her brother and father died, she chose to remain in this room and not move to the main bedroom. I wanted it to look like the last person that used it was Lydia herself, right before she died. The mansion had to be abandoned very shortly after the Duchess's death, and I wanted this room to look like that's exactly what happened. I even filled the wardrobe with clothes, the drawers with books and scrolls, etc. The bedroom next door is a stark contrast to this one, since it was just a guest room.
To all employees of the Ashbury Manor wine cellar, as most of you know, there are rumours of a strange, unseen being roaming around the cellar. I would like to declare that these rumours are true. I understand that most, if not all of you, may no longer desire to work here. Please trust me when I say that there is nothing to fear. The being has and will cause no harm to anyone. It commonly opens and closes doors, and on rare occasion it pushes over one or two barrels. Its footsteps have also been heard around the cellar. Please note that I have brought this matter before Duke Harrington. He has ordered that work in the cellar continues as normal. We cannot let our wine production be slowed. Douglas Atkins, Cellar Overseer.
Hi, I'm Daniel Holmes. I did the voice acting for Arthur Boucher and Douglas Atkins. Although Chris did the story, I was the one who wrote the script. Except for the journal entries of Lydia and the Gravekeeper, which Chris did for the sake of adding a little variety to the writing style. I was also tasked to do some game testing. I thoroughly enjoyed doing the voice acting for the male characters in Key to Freedom. The butler, Arthur Boucher, and the cellar overseer, Douglas Atkins, had to be portrayed as very different individuals. On the one hand, you have Arthur, the distinguished, refined gentleman who had been serving the family faithfully for years. On the other hand, you have Douglas, a little less refined, responsible for many hard labor tasks. The contrast, I feel, provides the player with a broad view of the events in the mansion many years ago. Even though the experiences of these characters were not the same, both were affected by the supernatural events that took place, thus providing a haunting anticipation of what is to come in the game.
2nd November 1878. Since the passing of Duke Gregory Harrington IV, several of the cellar workers have left. Many of them believe that there is no reason to continue working here, especially with that unseen being roaming around. I fear that I too may have to seek alternative employment. There are more pressing matters around Ashbury Manor as well that need attending to. There is talk of a ghost roaming the upper rooms of the manor, and many, including myself, believe that it is the ghost of the Duke. Hence, wine production is no longer a priority here. The health of Madame Lydia has not improved. Regardless, she seems to be the only one holding things together around here. Although, I think she may even tell us to abandon the wine production altogether. These are strange times for us here. Our future is uncertain. I must mention though, if it wasn't for Madame Lydia, heaven only knows what would become of this manor.
'Yeah, that thing following you is invisible falling blocks. And those same blocks jumps out of the water to give the illusion that the monster is walking away. The reason why this door is shut behind the player, not just to keep the monster out, but also to keep the player in. It is there to help the player realize he or she doesn't need to explore the whole cellar in order to solve certain puzzles.
November 1878. Yesterday, Madame Lydia ordered the stoppage of wine production. The cellar will now be closed. It seems as though my concerns of unemployment have been realised. Most of the men spent yesterday packing things away. Only Harold and I are left now, finalising the closure. I have a spare moment to write in here while I wait for Harold to fetch a pulley to aid us in our box stacking. Once that is completed, I will remain to check that everything is in order and then lock up. He has been gone for an unusually long time now. I must make mention of the unseen being. While waiting for Harold, I decided to check on a few things in the kitchen. I noticed the being following me. That is something it has never done before. Even when I moved on to another room, it was still following me. I am starting to grow uneasy about this being. I pray that once I have locked up, it does not follow me home.
So Daniel did a bit of testing and he was trying to figure out this puzzle. Eventually he gave me the controls and said to me, "How does this puzzle work?" But I said to him, no, I need you to try and figure it out on your own so that I can get an idea of how well this puzzle works for other people. So I, controlling the game, asked him how he would solve this puzzle if he was in this situation in real life. So eventually he said, well, maybe try throwing that box on top of this broken balcony. And no, wait, that won't work. But then I said, let's try that. You know, experimentation is vital for puzzle solving. So I threw the box onto the balcony and Oh, without that box, I can't even climb onto this balcony in the first place. So, I have just encountered a game-breaking mechanic that was due to an oversight on my part. Testing is vital. I reached the point in the game where I realized I needed to create original puzzles. There was no easy way around it. Fortunately, Amnesia is capable of doing original puzzles. I was more confident with scripting after the success that was the lightning storm in the previous level, but I would start small, a simple puzzle. Eventually, as my skills improved, puzzles would become more complex. At this point, I was confident that I could produce new puzzles. I literally placed 4 levers, it was 4 at the time, and sat there thinking with Notepad opened in front of me. Yes, I used a Notepad. A few minutes passed and then suddenly script functions started to pop into my head. I just started typing, and whenever another would pop into my head, I would start typing that. Then I tested the puzzle out and it worked perfectly. This has never happened before, and unfortunately this will never happen again during the creation of this custom story. Of course, I tweaked it a bit and added more levers from the original 4 to 7, and there you go.
I fear greatly for my life. It seems as though I have angered the unseen being here in the cellar. Earlier on, I went to go and look for Harold because he had not returned with the pulley. I was stopped at the staircase by the being. It was growling at me, something else it had never done before. I tried to make a break for the staircase, but the being knocked me over. It then went into a frenzy and broke the supporting beam, causing the collapse of the entire staircase. In my hysteria, I ran to the engine room and locked myself in. And here I am, alone. My pen and paper are my only comfort. Perhaps that monster of a being will get tired of waiting and move on to the other parts of the cellar. I may then be able to get out through the back door.
Some people might think the boiler was an unoriginal puzzle, but I wouldn't even call it a puzzle to begin with. It's a no-brainer, put coal into the furnace and turn it on, that's all. The boiler is only there for 2 reasons. The first is, it forces the player to explore further down the basement and into the kitchen, because that's where the player will find some more coal. It is here the player is reminded that he or she is being stalked by the unseen being. We're also reminded of the roaming monster, that same monster the player saw earlier in the game. These encounters are there to add anticipation. hinting that the player will have to eventually face these monsters. The second reason for the boiler to exist: every machine needs a power source. When the boiler is operational, that is when the puzzle truly begins. So I had no idea how to script animation. In this case, I wanted the pistons to rapidly move up and down to give the player a unique and clear indication that he or she has succeeded in activating the generator. When it came to a single piston, I did this by placing 10 pistons in the same spot and have each of them positioned at a slightly different height. The game would then display one at a time whilst switching between each piston every 30th of a second. So in reality, when you look at the 3 pistons, the game engine is actually switching between 30 identical pistons to give the illusion of movement. Really, the fundamentals of animation. No, I did not steal this idea from the Lord of the Rings. I just thought it would be kinda cool to have a massive underground hall with columns as far as the eye can see. But this presents a few challenges. There are many instances where the entire map can be within the player's field of vision. Now, this sort of thing can be very demanding as far as computing performance is concerned, because there are no walls for objects to hide behind. The game would have to render almost every single thing in this level, thus resulting in poor performance. To counteract this issue, I had to try to simplify the level. Here's an example. All the columns in the distance that are in the unreachable dark areas of the map are just blocks that have been blown up to match the size of an actual column. Blocks only have a total of 12 polygons each, as opposed to a column's 232 polygons. I also tried to reduce the amount of light, because lighting effects are actually one of the biggest culprits in bad performance. In this case, this is actually a good thing, because it definitely adds to the creepiness of this map. The vase on top of the tallest shelf is an example of how I would try to mix things up a bit. Instead of just having the player pick up a set of keys found on top of a desk or in a drawer. But there were some challenges, such as how the keys would not always appear when the vase would fall and break on impact. There was one tester, in fact, on the frictional forums that brought this to my attention. Little things like that took about 2/3 of the time when creating this custom story. I even had a to-do list that had tons of somewhat little things that needed my attention, as opposed to many big things. I didn't want the player to accidentally pick up the blue shard without knowing what it was that had been picked up in the first place. So I rigged it in a way that would require the player to move the bucket out the way in order to reveal the shard. I had to script it in because it used to be possible to pick up the shard even if you could not see it. If the player jumped off a high location and fell to the ground, the player, for some reason, would survive the fall. This meant that I had to create a fall to your death sequence whenever the player would jump from the top of both towers. It's little things like that that could break the immersive experience of a game, and it was something that I had to correct. This puzzle was the most complex one I had to script, and for the most part, I did a pretty good job, but there was one little hiccup, or a bug, in this puzzle. When the player encounters this bug, it actually breaks the combination that the player is required to input. But it was difficult to find this bug, because there seemed to be no pattern indication of when it would happen. So I added some more scripting that would help me find the problem. I did this by having the game display a number whenever I press a button. So when I pressed the right button, it would display the number 1, and then the next button would display number 2, and you get the picture. Occasionally I discovered that the number 12 would randomly be displayed out of sequence. This helped me narrow down the problem and was able to correct it, but it had taken me hours to fix, and after this experience I decided to just stick with things that are simple to script. I can't remember why I wanted to have a tower in the first place, but one concern I had was players would get bored on the way up. So I added 1 or 2 ghost encounters. The first encounter would require a bit of careful planning, because hopefully some of you may have noticed the appearing and disappearing of the ghost of Lord Gregory. But this effect only happens when the line of sight is broken because of the 2 columns that stand between the player and the ghost. A lot of people tend to keep a lot of junk in the attic, and since the tower is too high for any practical use, it acts as the Ashbury attic. Junk isn't limited to what that thing is, other than the fact that it is a discarded possession, whatever it may be. So in a way, anything can be considered junk, but I wasn't in the mood to decorate these 2 rooms with almost every object that Amnesia has to offer. So instead, I simply imported many objects from some of the levels in Dark Descent, and just rearranged them. That saved me a lot of work.
19th August, 1882. Today the architects and engineers finished their work in Ashbury Manor. Several years have passed since they began. This morning, Madame Lydia told me about the work that had been done. Some secret rooms hidden by complex mechanisms have been built into the manor. I was not told about what exactly these rooms were for. I suspect that Madame Lydia has some things she desires to be hidden. One of my fellow servants mentioned today how pleased they are with how affairs are being run in the county. It seems that Madame Lydia has proved to be a fine duchess. I attribute that to Peter. Many of us in the manor believe that when Madame Lydia comes of age, she will marry Peter. Perhaps then there will be posterity who will inherit Ashbury Manor. That would please me greatly, although it may not be in my day.
So yeah, the crystal shards glow. It's there to help the player spot the shard more easily. In fact, in many cases, nobody would ever think to look inside a suit of armor. A spotlight was used so that even if the player did not use the chair to stand on when the helmet was removed from the suit, a beam of green light would appear and reveal the existence of the shard. When the ghost of Lord Gregory finds the player disturbing his ashes, the ghost freaks out and starts chasing the player down the stairway. There is no real ghost chasing the player, but only large invisible boxes called script areas that slowly work their way down the stairway. These areas are the point of location where the sound effects of the ghost comes from. Also, whenever the player collides with one of these script areas, a death sequence then takes place. This door was an abandoned idea. It was actually going to lead to more living quarters, where the butlers and maidservants would have resided. In fact, it was going to be its own level. In the Key to Freedom map folder, there are 8 levels in total, listed as map 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 9. There is no level 6 because I planned on having this door lead to map 6. But because of how long it has taken me to finish this custom story, I chose to abandon this idea, and as a result, this door is only used for when the player exits the second tower through a completely different door.
9th January 1883. There is an element of fear creeping into the manor. Every servant is uneasy. Strange phenomena as well as ghost sightings have been reported in the upper rooms. All these years of rumor and speculation have ended. Madame Lydia, including myself, believe that it is the ghost of the late Duke Gregory IV. Although Madame Lydia, surprisingly, does not seem too concerned about it. It is strange to relate how this ghostly activity increased soon after she had her left arm amputated. The amputation seems to have helped little to stop the infection from spreading. Peter is hopeful, though. He seems very fond of Madame Lydia, despite her having lost her arm.
This scene in the dining hall was without a doubt my most favorite in all the game. I'm sure it is quite obvious as to why. While I was testing this scene, all I wanted to do was just stay here, walk around, and enjoy the oasis of tranquility. Chris's inclusion of this scene was a reward for the player for having come so far in the game. I felt that I, of all people, deserved this reward the most.
Originally, this corridor did not exist. The dining hall and the main hall were directly connected to each other. But for some reason, this map became very laggy. I later realized that occlusion culling had a problem and was not working properly. For those that don't know, occlusion culling is a render technique that tells the computer what it should render and what it should not. For an example, if there is a wall standing between the player and a table, then the computer doesn't need to render that table, thus allowing for more performance leeway. Unfortunately, it seemed to not do its job properly, so I had to place this corridor in order to induce occlusion culling. The arch shape of this corridor is there to make sure that the player cannot see both halls simultaneously, thus allowing for occlusion culling to take effect.
As you all know, good games, and even mods for that matter, require thorough testing. One of my tasks was to be a tester. In a way, I was the best tester for this mod, purely because I am not a fan of horror games. Now that may seem like a contradiction, so I will elaborate. The main developer, Chris, used me to get an indication of how well some of his scares, for example, would work on people. There were even times where Chris would tell me what was going to happen in a particular situation, but I would still freak out and then refuse to carry on testing. And with that, my wife Camilla would take the testing seat and carry on quite willingly. Yeah.
Whenever I get the opportunity, I always try to light the levels with opposite complementary colors. Of course, in most of Key to Freedom, I use a lot of blue and orange because these colors are complementary to each other. This is one of the many reasons why I'm glad I chose to have this game take place at night, because the cold blue night is a nice contrast to the warm glow of a flame. The best example of this can be seen in the entrance hall of the hub of this custom story. Likewise, this room also has complementary colors, red and green. This room is the laggiest in this custom story due to the many lighting effects and objects scattered throughout this rather large room. But having said that, the one saving grace is that this level is only laggy on my PC. My PC is using high-end hardware from 2008. I'm not the kind of guy that's gonna buy new hardware every year or two, and apparently there are plenty of people like me that don't have the luxury to do so either. You see, there have been cases of people making custom stories on rather powerful PCs, and as a result, anyone with a lesser machine would end up with a laggy, poor frame rate experience. This is why I tried so hard to make this custom story run smooth on my machine.
24th April 1883. In 2 days we leave Ashbury Manor. This morning the local government tried to hold another meeting. Yet again it was interrupted by the ghost, but this time things got out of hand. The meeting had barely commenced when tables, chairs and legal documents started flying across the room. Everyone fled in terror, including some of the servants. A quick decision was made by the local government to abandon the manor and dissolve our county into another. All who remain here this evening are those of us who are very reluctant to leave, even with all these strange things happening. We have no choice though. There is nothing for us here anymore. If only Madame Lydia was still with us. Her amputation merely slowed the process of her death. The infection had spread too much.
It is said you get the best experience if you wear headphones, and I just never understood that statement. Because this game has absolutely no support for headphone virtualization. Let me explain what I mean. When you play Amnesia and you hear something precisely to your left, that sound effect is only gonna play in your left headphone. But human ears don't work that way. If you were to stand next to an open door to your left, and then covered your left ear with your hand and slammed the door shut with your foot, would you hear absolutely nothing? Of course not. You can still hear it through your right ear. Headphone virtualization is an audio technique that simulates real hearing. Now, this phonograph plays music, and I tried to create my own headphone virtualization by having 2 audio samples produce the needed effect. The first audio sample plays the music itself, no echo effects, nothing, just a pure recording of a piano. The other sample is played simultaneously, and its purpose is to produce the echo only. The first sample's spatial origin is the phonograph, so the sound always comes from the phonograph. Where in contrast, the second sample fills the room and can be heard from all directions. It's fairly effective, but again, this game doesn't support real headphone virtualization. An example of true virtualization can be heard in the MP3 file called Virtual Barbershop. It's easy to find. In fact, you can find it on YouTube. Granted, this is headphone virtualization done with real microphones, but it can be done digitally as well. I hope that in the future, survival horror games will have headphone virtualization as a standard feature.
Symmetrical book stacking, just like the Philadelphia mass turbulence of 1947.
You're right, no human being would stack books like this.
I love making games, but I'm currently working on a comic book because it's the only thing I can do in my current situation. There is no game studio in my home country of South Africa, to my knowledge, and foreign game studios won't hire me because I live so impractically far away, or I don't have enough experience in the field because I can't get any. I love working on map design or concept art or sound design or animation in general, not programming. I suck at programming, even though I have done it before, but I would love to work on an actual game, and this is the reason why I made this custom story. It's the closest thing I'll get to making my own game.
25th April 1883. It is my last day here. I have spent most of my time getting the upper rooms in order. Everyone else has left, but I could not bear leaving the rooms of Lord Gregory and Madame Lydia in the state they were in. Oh, how I miss those two. I had an odd experience today. This afternoon, as I was leaving the lounge, I was startled by one of the suits of armor that had somehow moved to the center of the hallway. It was holding out a note, which I cautiously retrieved. The note is addressed to Peter. It was then that I noticed the suit of armor was missing its left arm. I'm not sure what to make of it, but I shall pay a visit to Peter tomorrow after I have left the manor, and give him the note. It seems quite important.
So fear, believe it or not, was not my biggest priority when making Key to Freedom. It's most likely not even that scary for many people, but that's not why I worked on this custom story in the first place. I tried to implement unconventional methods of danger that the player would have to confront. Doing something with ghosts seemed more interesting than just always having to rely on the game's already available monsters. I just wanted to try something new and interesting with Amnesia. There was one thing I wanted to prove to people, and that is the quality of a custom story isn't always determined by what tools the creator uses. For an example, I used Notepad to script Key to Freedom. Of course, there are free programs like Notepad++ that makes things a little easier, but if your internet is down for some reason and you can't download it, I am pleased to report that Notepad doesn't place any limit on what you can do with Amnesia. To create custom graphics, I used GIMP 2, a free image editor, which is great for creating custom icons that support proper transparencies. You can also create custom textures if you download the required plugins. Because I'm an artist, I could have created custom images, but once again, to prove my point that the content for creating a good custom story is easy to accumulate, I just modified Amnesia's concept art and used them for the loading screens. And finally, there is free audio editor. It does pretty advanced audio manipulation, and it's great. But if you just want to convert WAV files to OGG files accurately, go to media.io. There have been several custom stories where the player can actually walk right up to a house, but unfortunately, because it lacks a lot of detail, it just looks bad. But in Frictional's defense, the player isn't supposed to be this close to a house, but in this case the player needs to be. So using the normal model just would not do. I had to build a house from the ground up because it needed the detail. Also, you could actually now walk into the house, which was something you couldn't do with the original model.
18th November 1878. This is my 4th day here as the new gravekeeper. Finally, a comfortable career. No more hard construction work, no more heavy lifting, and most importantly, no more garbage collecting. My responsibilities are fairly trivial, like trimming the bushes and showing people to their deceased loved ones. In fact, the hardest thing about this job is when I'm occasionally required to dig a hole in preparation for a new grave. But that's not why I've decided to start writing in my new journal. No, the Duchess herself, Madame Lydia, came over to visit me. She asked me if I could find her a spot for a new gravesite. She even supplied her own coffin and tombstone. A stunning tombstone, I must say. A well-crafted cross with a brilliant carving of an eagle. I asked her who it was for, but she said it was for no one. After I have helped her with finding a suitable location and her men have placed the tombstone and buried the coffin, she just left. That's it, went back into her mansion. 26 November 1878. Boy, do I have an interesting story to tell. This morning, a couple of men brought in a body of Harold Donnelly. I was told that he, would you believe it, was found in the attic right above Madame Lydia's bedroom. They found him all tied up in rope whilst hanging upside down. Apparently the reason why the body was found in the first place was because Lydia herself complained about a stench in her room. I also heard another rumor that she used to keep rope next to her bed, that she used for outdoor activity and games. But one day she couldn't find her beloved rope, but now here it is, wrapped around the constricted body of Harold. Is there a murderer in our midst? Well, I'm now left to clean up the mess. Unfortunately, Harold's family couldn't afford a coffin or a tombstone, but you know what? I'm going to be a good Samaritan this time. There is that empty coffin that Madame Lydia buried here. Apparently, the coffin only holds a small glass shard. I could just push it aside. There's plenty room for a body. 13th of April, 1893. I am shaking even as I write. Where to begin? Earlier this evening, on my way back to my house, I noticed that much of the cemetery has been disturbed. Someone has broken down a few of the trees and shrubbery, and 3 tombstones have fallen over. I continued exploring the cemetery, and to my dismay, I discovered the grave of Harold has been robbed. Or at least that's what I thought. I opened the coffin, and to my horror, the body was gone. The glass shard was still in it though. I noticed some tracks leading out of the cemetery. It seemed to be headed towards Ashbury Manor. I decided to follow them, and when I approached the river, I saw the decomposed body of Harold limping towards the mansion. It was hideous and frightening. so much so that I froze and just stood there like a petrified coward. It was foolish of me, but fortunately the beast disappeared and I ran back to the cemetery. This grave was tainted, but I was too afraid to do anything about it. I decided to close the coffin and bury it again.
This nameless character you play as is probably in his late teens. I'm not sure how many people have noticed this, but he doesn't lose any sanity when standing in darkness, like before. But he also doesn't gasp or pant as much as he used to as well, because unlike Daniel, whom you play in Dark Descent, this character becomes a little braver as time goes on. Of course, this doesn't mean he is immune to any form of sanity drain. No, it will drain when the player encounters the monster inside the mansion. And also, the longer you keep hearing the whispers of the ghosts that dwell here in the cemetery. I'm more of a classic gamer type of guy, and I don't mean retro gaming, no. I'm a fan of the more timeless, high-quality type of games. You know, instant classics like Super Smash Bros. Melee, Portal 2, Worms Armageddon, Sonic CD, Braid, etc. From this list of games, one would think I'm not into survival horror. Well, I used to think that as well, but after playing the demo of Amnesia: The Dark Descent, it was then I realized that all these over-the-top, gory, action-oriented zombie shooters that claim to be survival horror really are not. At least not true horror, the kind that induces real fear into the player. Even though generally I'm more of a light-hearted, fun type of guy, that doesn't necessarily mean I don't enjoy variety. And Amnesia filled that void that variety was missing. And I want to continue that experience. And my way of doing this is by contributing, by creating Key to Freedom. I hope you enjoyed this custom story, and I hope you enjoyed this commentary. Thank you for listening, and take care.
My dearest Peter, I hope you have found this letter sooner than later. Under the Bible is the key to the bank's safe deposit box, number 217. In it is my last will and testament. It states that you, Peter T. Wilkinson, will inherit Ashbury Manor, along with all its wealth and estates. My brother had no knowledge of this before he died. He always felt that the estate should remain in the family. But, for obvious reasons, that cannot happen anymore. For quite some time now, I have been searching for a successor. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized the obvious. You were the only one that was truly there for me. All those years you have helped me through the hard times. But more importantly, you were there during the good times, when everyone thought that I didn't need anyone, when the future of Ashbury Manor wasn't in jeopardy. That is why I have hidden this key completely out of sight, to prevent other, more determined men from taking the estate from us. That will not happen. My brother will make sure of that. But I fear he may try to stop even you from taking Ashbury Manor from the Harrington family, even in death. However, once the estate is now yours, all will be right again. My heart sorrows when I think that our lives could have been different if circumstances allowed. But knowing that you still live and have a full life ahead of you, I hope to improve it by giving all that I have. This is my last gift to you. Be well, my love. Yours truly, Lydia.
Near the end of this custom story, the player finally gets to see the ghost of Madame Lydia. I would recommend you listen to this track near the end of the game when you have her in your sight. I hate to break it to you, there are no custom models in this custom story. She is just a slimmed down ritual prisoner from Dark Descent wearing a skirt with a rock on the head. But this really was the best part about making a custom story. I had a lot of fun repurposing Dark Descent's resources to create a new experience. And I have seen many other custom stories where people have taken something and turned it into something completely different.
Dear traveller, I do not know who you are, or even how old you are, but judging from your actions, there's no doubt in my mind that Peter Wilkinson had sent you to retrieve the key. You knew exactly where to look, and only Peter knew its true location. I pray that you are successful in your quest. I would also be grateful if you could give him the letter you found that was intended for him. Now that the estate will become his, all will return back to normal. All paranormal activity will disappear now that the estate no longer belongs to the Harrington family. The ghost, my brother, will no longer have that anchor to keep him here. And I, too, will finally move on to the realm that awaits us. I could not bear to leave Gregory behind in the maddened state that he was, but now it is finally over, thanks to you, my young brave venturer, my hero, my key to freedom. Sincerely, Duchess Lydia Harrington.